The Horizon Star was not a large ship, but it carried an importance far beyond its size. It was a research vessel, designed to explore areas of the northern seas where few dared to sail. In 1987, a team of 5 scientists set out on a journey that was supposed to last only a few weeks. Their mission seemed simple: to study magnetic anomalies in the Arctic waters, patterns that didn't make sense, strange shifts that puzzled even the best researchers in the world. Each of the scientists was highly skilled. They had spent years in their fields, some in geology, some in oceanography, and a few in advanced physics. They were passionate about uncovering mysteries and had dedicated their lives to understanding the unknown. The crew was a mix of careful planning and quiet ambition. They left the coast on a calm summer evening, the sky painted with soft pink and orange light as the sun dipped toward the horizon. The sea was almost mirror-like, and the air smelled of salt and distant ice. They all felt a quiet excitement, like stepping into a place that held secrets just waiting to be discovered. The captain, a man with decades of experience at sea, assured everyone that the waters were familiar and safe. But even he admitted that the region they were entering had its own mysteries, magnetic disturbances that had confused previous expeditions and made some navigational instruments behave strangely. For the first few days, everything went smoothly. The Horizon Star moved steadily through the cold northern waters. The scientists collected data, ran tests, and recorded readings in their notebooks and computers. At night, they would gather in the small mess hall, drinking coffee and talking quietly about the day's findings. Sometimes they would laugh. Sometimes they would sit in thoughtful silence. They noticed odd things. Sometimes compasses spun without reason. Radios picked up strange static patterns. And at times, the auroras above the ice seemed unusually bright, almost dancing in sync with their instruments. But these were just anomalies, small and strange, yet not alarming. Then on the 5th night of their journey, things began to change. The sky darkened faster than usual, clouds gathering where none had been forecast. A cold wind began to rise, cutting through the decks and rattling doors and railings. The scientists checked their instruments and noticed that readings had jumped, magnetic spikes unlike anything they had seen before. The captain ordered them to stay calm, telling them storms could play tricks on navigation. But deep down, everyone on the ship felt a sense of unease, a whisper that something was not right. As the night grew deeper, the ship entered a part of the ocean locals sometimes referred to as the Silent Deep. It was an area known for its strange stillness. Waves seemed to flatten unnaturally, and even the wind sounded hollow. The Horizon Star moved into this quiet zone, and for a while, it seemed almost peaceful. But soon, the calm became eerie. The instruments began to fail one by one. Compasses spun wildly, radar screens flickered, and even the basic communications equipment started giving distorted signals. The scientists tried to contact the mainland, sending repeated radio messages, but nothing came back. No answers, no interference, no static. It was as if their signals had vanished into the air itself. Hours passed, and the crew grew anxious. They double-checked the engines and navigational charts. Everything seemed physically intact, but the instruments refused to behave. The auroras above grew brighter and began moving in strange patterns, arcs of green and blue that danced as though responding to something invisible. One of the scientists, the youngest on the team, suggested they might be witnessing some sort of electromagnetic storm. Another countered, saying that storms had patterns, but this had no recognizable order. It was something entirely different. Just before midnight, the Horizon Star reached the center of the anomaly. And then, without warning, the ship's systems went dark. Lights flickered once, twice, and then the entire vessel was swallowed by a darkness that was not just physical, but seemed alive, pressing against the minds of everyone on board. The radio gave one last garbled transmission, something that sounded like a word, or maybe a warning, and then it fell silent. The ship had vanished from the maps, from radar, from everything. On the mainland, rescue teams were immediately alerted. Helicopters and patrol boats scoured the area, searching for any trace of the Horizon Star. Weeks passed, but no wreckage, no debris, and no signal was ever found. It was as if the ship had simply disappeared into thin air. Families of the crew waited anxiously, hoping for news, clinging to any fragment of information they could find. Newspapers covered the story briefly, calling it the vanishing of the Horizon Star, but soon interest faded. The world moved on, leaving only unanswered questions and growing rumors. Theories began to emerge. Some believed the ship had been swallowed by a secret underwater trench or an uncharted sinkhole. Others whispered about more extraordinary possibilities: time slips, parallel dimensions, or interference from forces beyond human understanding. Conspiracy theories claimed the government had intervened and hidden the truth. People debated endlessly, but no one could prove anything. And for the families of the crew, the uncertainty was unbearable. Every passing day made the hope of seeing their loved ones again more fragile. Inside the Horizon Star, if it still existed, it is impossible to know what the crew experienced. Were they aware of their disappearance? Did time behave normally for them? These questions remain unanswered, but the ship itself became legendary, a symbol of the mysteries that the world could not explain. Scientists continued to study the areas where the vessel had vanished, and strange readings were still occasionally reported. Compasses would behave oddly, radios would pick up unexplained signals, and in some nights the auroras seemed unusually vibrant. It was as if the Horizon Star had left a lingering presence, a reminder that the ordinary world is not always as solid or predictable as it seems. Even after decades, the story of the Horizon Star captured imaginations. For young scientists, it became a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration. The idea that the unknown still exists, that the world holds secrets beyond human understanding, fascinated them. Explorers and thrill-seekers would plan expeditions hoping to find evidence of the vanished ship, to uncover something that would explain the inexplicable. And yet, every attempt ended in frustration. The ship seemed to exist in a space where normal rules did not apply. Maps showed open water, but no one could find it. Instruments failed, as if reality itself rejected detection. For the families, every anniversary of the disappearance brought grief and reflection. They held on to memories, laughter around the dinner table, letters sent from distant ports, photographs of smiling faces against cold northern skies. Each family kept their own rituals, leaving lights burning by the coast, hoping to guide the lost home, or telling stories to keep the crew alive in memory. Communities in Alaska and the surrounding regions spoke of the Horizon Star with reverence and fear, as a reminder that the world could still surprise humanity in ways it had no control over. Even outside the Arctic, the story of the Horizon Star traveled across the globe. Documentaries, articles, and interviews tried to recreate the last days of the ship, piecing together information from scattered reports and testimonies. People speculated endlessly. Had the crew found something extraordinary? Had they entered a place beyond normal understanding? Some argued they might still exist somewhere, caught between worlds, unable to return. The lack of answers became part of the legend, and in some ways, more powerful than any explanation could ever be. And so, the Horizon Star remained a mystery, a ship that left the known world and never returned. Its disappearance marked the beginning of something larger, a story that would continue for decades, drawing in scientists, investigators, and ordinary people who could not resist the pull of the unknown. It was not just a missing ship. It was a symbol of the limits of human knowledge, the fragility of our understanding, and the hidden wonders of the Earth itself. The night the Horizon Star disappeared, the sea was calm again. Winds had stopped, the auroras faded, and the ice lay still under a cold moon. On the surface, it looked ordinary, peaceful, and quiet. But beneath that quiet, the world had shifted. Something had been taken, something unseen and unfathomable. And the story of the Horizon Star was only beginning, waiting for the day it would be found, for the day the questions would demand answers, and for the day that whatever had claimed the ship would return. The disappearance was not the end. It was a beginning that no one could understand, a beginning that would haunt the world for decades. a beginning that would challenge everything humanity thought it knew about the seas, about time, and about the hidden forces that quietly shape reality. Years passed since the Horizon star vanished without a trace. 37 years to be exact. For decades, the story remained a ghostly memory, an unsolved mystery, a cautionary tale whispered in maritime circles, a legend that inspired articles, documentaries, and endless speculation. Families of the lost crew had aged, grown older, and many had passed away without answers. The world moved on, but in remote northern waters, the ocean held its secret tightly. Then, in the summer of 2024, something astonishing happened. A fishing trawler operating near the Arctic ice fields reported seeing a ship floating silently on the horizon. At first, the crew thought it was a mirage or a mistaken identification, perhaps a grounded cargo vessel. But as they drew closer, the shape of the ship became unmistakable. Its structure was identical to the Horizon star, every line, every curve, every marking exactly as it had been decades ago. The fishermen radioed the Coast Guard, urgency creeping into their voices. The authorities initially dismissed it as a hallucination caused by heat, fatigue, or fog, but multiple radar stations picked up the same reading. When the Coast Guard reached the location, they were stunned. The ship was there, drifting as if it had simply returned from a long voyage. There were no signs of damage or deterioration. Paint was faded only slightly, despite decades in storage. The ship was eerily pristine, almost untouched by time. It seemed impossible. How could a vessel vanish completely, remain missing for almost 40 years, and then return as if nothing had happened? Upon boarding, the rescuers found the interior in an odd state. The galley was stocked with food that looked recently used. Lights were operational, and the engines, astonishingly, could start without issue. Footprints were visible in dust and dirt, but there was no one aboard. It was as if the crew had been there moments ago, but where had they gone? The air smelled faintly of ozone, strange and metallic. Even the Coast Guard officers, hardened by years of maritime work, felt an unshakable sense of unease. A radio left running on the ship gave a faint signal. It was a human voice, weak and distorted, repeating a single phrase over and over. "We have returned, but not alone." The officers tried to respond, but the voice never acknowledged them. It was as if it belonged to someone, or something that existed in a different space somewhere beyond comprehension. The Horizon star was immediately towed to a secure naval facility. The public was given a sanitized story. A mystery ship found adrift in the Arctic, nothing more. But internally, government and scientific teams were fascinated and terrified. Images and limited reports leaked online, sparking a wave of excitement and fear. Some scientists declared it could be a hoax, but those who had seen the ship firsthand knew the truth. It was the Horizon star. As the ship was examined, a strange object drew attention. In the center of the deck, a device had been bolted firmly, in place. It was unlike anything the team had ever seen. Small, metallic, and glowing faintly with a soft blue light, the device seemed almost alive. Instruments near it behaved erratically. Compasses spun, digital meters fluctuated wildly, and even handheld electronics failed when taken close. Several members of the investigation team reported sudden headaches and a sense of disorientation. One of the scientists, Dr. Elena Cruz, a physicist with a background in electromagnetism, was particularly drawn to the device. She noticed subtle patterns in its glow, almost like it was pulsing in response to the people around it. When someone was anxious or frightened, the light intensified. When they were calm, it dimmed. Dr. Cruz suggested it might not be a weapon, but a kind of sensor that reacted to emotion or consciousness. Her colleagues were skeptical at first, but as they spent more time near the object, even they had to admit it behaved in ways that defied explanation. In a secure storage area of the ship, a notebook was found. Preserved inside a waterproof container, it belonged to one of the missing crew members. The pages were yellowed, but the handwriting remained clear. The entries were normal at first, observations about magnetic readings, notes on weather, and details of daily life aboard the ship. But the last pages were chilling. The crew described a strange region in the Arctic they had named the Fold, a place where the normal rules of physics seemed to break down. They wrote about seeing lights move against the wind, instruments behaving independently, and a sensation of time stretching and folding upon itself. The final entry was the most unsettling. It read, "We have crossed through the fold. Time doesn't move here. If we return, we bring something that shouldn't exist." The words alone were enough to make the team pause. Whatever the crew had encountered, it was not something from Earth. At least not from any part of Earth that humans understood. As the investigation continued, scientists ran a series of tests on the device. It emitted electromagnetic pulses at frequencies no one could identify. Metal objects vibrated in its presence, and nearby electrical equipment often short-circuited or gave nonsensical readings. Attempts to move the device triggered violent reactions. Lights would flash, alarms would go off, and some team members reported a sudden, almost overwhelming sense of dread. Despite precautions, curiosity was impossible to suppress. Dr. Cruz and a few others began hypothesizing. What if the device was not a weapon, but a kind of key or gateway? What if it had allowed the crew to enter some other dimension and had returned with them, or at least a part of it had? The idea seemed far-fetched, almost like science fiction, but the evidence was compelling. The behavior of the object could not be explained by current technology, physics, or even material science. The emotional impact on the team was profound. Some scientists began having nightmares, visions of endless black waters and faint whispers calling their names. Even the most logical minds on the team could not escape a creeping fear. There was a sense that the horizon star had returned with a presence, a quiet, invisible thing that watched, that waited, and that could influence the minds of those near it. Authorities began considering containment protocols. The ship and its device were placed in a secure, isolated facility. Military personnel monitored the area, and no unauthorized personnel were allowed near the vessel. Despite these measures, Dr. Cruz continued her research, convinced that the SciFi device held answers. Answers not only about the ship and the missing crew, but about the fundamental nature of reality. She spent long hours aboard, documenting every pulse, every fluctuation, every response to human presence. Late one night, Dr. Cruz made an observation that changed everything. The device's pulses were not random. They followed a pattern, almost like a language. Every fluctuation, every change in intensity, seemed to correspond to something she could not yet understand. She hypothesized that it might be a form of communication, an attempt by whatever the crew had encountered to reach out. She attempted to mimic the pulse patterns with nearby equipment, but the results were erratic. Sometimes the device responded positively, pulsing brighter, but at other times, it seemed to react aggressively, shaking the ship slightly and sending sparks from nearby electrical panels. Word of the Horizon Star's return eventually leaked to the public. News outlets were filled with speculation and wild theories. Some said it was a government experiment, a hoax, or even a carefully orchestrated publicity stunt. Others feared that the ship had returned with something dangerous, something that could change life as they knew it. Social media buzzed with conspiracy theories and imagined scenarios, but no one had solid answers. For the families of the original crew, the return of the ship was bittersweet. There was hope, yes, that their loved ones might somehow still be alive, but there was also fear. The ship had returned, but the crew had not. The presence of the mysterious device made the situation even more unsettling. Letters and photos kept for decades now seemed like relics of a world that might never understand what had truly happened. Even scientists who had spent decades in the field were forced to reconsider their understanding of reality. They questioned whether the Horizon Star's journey had exposed them to something beyond Earth's natural laws. Every test on the device, every observation, every reading seemed to challenge everything they had learned. The sense of discovery was exhilarating, but it was accompanied by a quiet, persistent fear that some questions might be better left unanswered. And so the Horizon Star sat in the isolated facility, a symbol of human curiosity and the unknown. It was no longer just a lost ship. It had become a mystery that tested the limits of science, a reminder that the world still held secrets beyond comprehension. The crew might never be found, but the ship had returned to remind humanity that some mysteries do not fade with time. They wait, patient and silent, for the day we might finally understand. The return of the Horizon Star was a beginning, not an end. What the crew had brought back with them, the device, the strange energy, the unanswered signals, was a message, a challenge, and perhaps a warning. Humanity had glimpsed the unknown, and it had returned to the world, pulsing softly on the deck of a ship that had defied time itself. Every night, those who worked near the ship could feel it. The soft glow of the device, the faint hum in the air, the sense that something unseen was watching. It was a reminder that the Horizon Star's story was far from over. And in the minds of those who dared to study it, a single thought grew stir. The Horizon Star sat in the secure naval facility like a monument to the impossible. Every day, more experts arrived to study the ship and the mysterious device that had appeared on its deck. Scientists, engineers, and military specialists all had the same mixture of curiosity and unease. Some treated it as a scientific opportunity of a lifetime. Others feared it, sensing that the ship and the device were more than anyone could handle. Dr. Elena Cruz was at the center of it all. She spent long hours aboard the ship, cataloging every reading and fluctuation from the device. Every pulse of blue light, every tiny vibration, was meticulously recorded. She had begun to notice patterns that no one else seemed to see. The device was not simply reacting to its surroundings. It seemed to respond to human thought, emotion, and even intent. When someone approached it hesitantly, it pulsed softly. When someone approached aggressively or with fear, it flared brighter, shaking slightly as if alive. The other scientists were skeptical at first. Many argued that the readings could be explained by natural phenomena or electrical interference. But after weeks of testing, it became clear that this was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Compasses refused to stay steady. Electronic devices would glitch or fail entirely near it. Even the metal structures of the ship seemed to hum, faintly in response. Then came the notebook found aboard the Horizon Star. Preserved in a waterproof container, it contained the last writings of the missing crew. For Dr. Cruz, reading it was like stepping into their minds, reliving their journey through the strange fold. At first, the entries were routine, notes about magnetic readings, weather, and daily activities. But the final pages were unlike anything she had seen before. The crew described crossing through a region of the Arctic they called the Fold. They wrote about time stretching and folding upon itself, about lights moving against the wind, and about instruments behaving independently. They spoke of a presence, something they could feel but not see. And then the chilling final words. We have crossed through the fold. Time doesn't move here. If we return, we bring something that shouldn't exist. Dr. Cruz could not stop thinking about those words. Whatever the crew had encountered, whatever they had brought back, it was now here, and now it was being studied by humans who had no idea of its true power. The investigation team ran every test imaginable. They exposed the device to high-energy scans, but it reacted violently. Small shock waves radiated outward, knocking over equipment and causing alarms to blare. The device itself seemed unharmed, pulsing with steady blue light as if mocking their attempts to understand it. They tried moving it to different parts of the facility, isolating it, shielding it, even covering it with lead. Nothing worked. Days turned into weeks. The effects on the human team became more apparent. Some scientists reported headaches, nausea, and difficulty sleeping. Others described subtle changes in perception, objects appearing slightly out of place, sounds seeming delayed or distorted. A few even claimed to hear whispers, soft voices that called their names when no one was there. Fear and fascination grew hand in hand. The ship and its device had become more than a mystery. They were a presence, something that could influence the world around it. Dr. Cruz became obsessed. She spent nights aboard the ship, observing the pulses and trying to communicate with the device in small ways. She developed theories that the device might be a kind of interface, something that allowed the crew to cross the fold. Perhaps it was a key, a gateway, or even a map of some kind. But every attempt to interact with it carried risk. One night, while adjusting a sensor near the device, the ship trembled slightly, and sparks flew from the control panels. Dr. Cruz had to step back, her heart pounding, realizing just how little she understood about the forces she was dealing with. The military personnel overseeing the project grew concerned. They restricted access, imposed stricter safety measures, and even considered shutting the project down. But Dr. Cruz argued that the device was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. "We can't just ignore it," she told them. "If we understand this, we could unlock knowledge that could change humanity forever. But if we mishandle it, we could unleash something we cannot control." The weeks of study led to small breakthroughs. The team discovered that the device emitted electromagnetic pulses that interfered with conventional technology. They realized it had a pattern, almost like a language, though no one could translate it. It was not random energy. It was deliberate. The pulses varied in intensity, frequency, and rhythm, seemingly designed to interact with living beings. One morning, Dr. Cruz noticed something extraordinary. While sitting quietly near the device, she focused her thoughts on calmness and observation. The blue pulse slowed, dimmed, and then pulsed in a new pattern, almost as if it was responding to her mental state. She tried again, this time thinking of questions about the fold, about the time anomalies described in the notebook. The device flickered, and the air around her seemed to thrum faintly. Other scientists began to notice similar reactions. It became apparent that the device was not inert. It was intelligent in some way, or at least capable of interacting with consciousness. It did not speak or move in ways humans expected, but it responded. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Whatever the crew of the Horizon Star had encountered, it had returned with them in the form of this device, and now humanity was faced with it. The more the team studied it, the more they noticed subtle changes in the Horizon Star itself. The ship seemed to resonate with the device almost as if it were alive. Floor panels vibrated, lights flickered, and even the metal hull hummed faintly. Dr. Cruz theorized that the device had become a central part of the ship's structure, integrating with it in ways that defied explanation. She suggested that the ship might have acted as a stabilizer or container for the device during its mysterious disappearance, keeping it safe or keeping it trapped. The presence of the device also began to affect interpersonal dynamics among the team. Some scientists became obsessed, working day and night, while others grew fearful, avoiding the ship whenever possible. Arguments arose, driven by stress, fear, and the unknown nature of what they were dealing with. Some nights, Dr. Cruz would hear quiet disagreements, whispers of doubt, and expressions of fear that were almost palpable. The device seemed to amplify these feelings, creating tension that could not be ignored. One particularly tense day, an engineer attempted to move the device without proper precautions. The ship shuddered violently, lights flashed, and alarms rang. It was a terrifying reminder that whatever they were dealing with was powerful and unpredictable. Afterward, the team realized that even small interactions could provoke reactions. The device was alive in some sense, or at least reactive, and careless handling could be dangerous. Despite these dangers, Dr. Cruz and her team were making progress. By carefully observing the pulses, they began to map patterns, associating specific rhythms with changes in nearby instruments, temperature, and human presence. They could not yet communicate directly, but they had the first hints of understanding. It was a fragile breakthrough, but a breakthrough nonetheless. One night, as Dr. Cruz documented her findings, she felt a chill sweep through the room. Wow. Device pulsed softly, almost as if it were breathing. For a moment she imagined it was aware of her, watching her, judging her curiosity. The thought was unsettling, yet it filled her with determination. She realized that the Horizon Star had returned not just to be studied. It had returned to teach, to warn, and perhaps to guide humanity. But Dr. Cruz also knew that time was a factor. The longer the device remained, the more unpredictable it became. Small changes in its pulse seemed to grow stronger, affecting not just instruments but people's thoughts and emotions. The team was on a delicate balance, learning from the device while avoiding its dangers. Each day brought new discoveries, new fears, and new questions about the fold, the device, and the ship itself. The mystery of the Horizon Star deepened with every passing day. What had the crew experienced? What exactly was the fold and how had they crossed it? And most importantly, what was the device, and why had it returned? Dr. Cruz could not answer these questions fully, but she felt that every pulse, every flicker of light was a clue. It was as if the ship and its device were alive, waiting for someone to understand. The story of the Horizon Star and its device had moved from legend to reality. Scientists, engineers, and even military personnel now faced a question that had no easy answer. They were in contact with something that defied explanation, a presence that could not be measured by ordinary instruments. And while curiosity drove them forward, fear remained close behind. Dr. Cruz often reflected on the crew who had disappeared decades ago. They had written their observations, encountered the fold, and returned, bringing something that should not exist. She wondered if they had understood what they were dealing with, or if they too had been overwhelmed by its power. One thing was certain: humanity was only beginning to comprehend the Horizon Star's story, and the device's secrets were far from fully revealed. The investigation continued, with slow, careful progress. Every pulse, every reaction, every fluctuation of the device was recorded and analyzed, and through it all, the Horizon Star stood silently, a remnant. Weeks passed since the Horizon Star returned, and the mystery of the device became the focus of the world's top scientists. The longer Dr. Elena Cruz and her team studied it, the more they realized how little they actually understood. The device was not just a strange artifact, it was something alive in a way that defied human logic. It interacted with the ship, the people around it, and even the instruments used to study it. Every experiment revealed new anomalies. One morning, Dr. Cruz noticed that the device's pulse had changed dramatically overnight. It was stronger, faster, more erratic. Nearby instruments reported magnetic readings unlike anything in recorded history. Thermometers fluctuated without reason. Compasses spun wildly, and even the floor panels seemed to vibrate faintly. She called the team together, urging caution. "It's evolving," she said, "or at least it's reacting to something we cannot see. We need to understand it before we make any mistakes." The team began digging deeper into the Horizon Star's logs and notebooks. They analyzed every entry left by the missing crew, looking for patterns or clues that could explain what the fold was and what the device actually did. The crew had described magnetic anomalies, strange lights, and a sensation of time stretching. But one thing stood out: a series of sketches in the margins of the notebooks. Lines, symbols, and strange shapes appeared next to readings, almost like a map or diagram. Dr. Cruz theorized that the crew had been trying to document the fold, to understand the space they had crossed. Meanwhile, the device continued to act. Strangely, when the team attempted to move it or even touch it, it pulsed violently. Sparks flew from nearby equipment, alarms went off, and some researchers felt sudden, inexplicable vertigo. Despite these dangers, curiosity drove them forward. Dr. Cruz suggested using remote observation tools to study it from a distance. Cameras, sensors, and robotic arms were employed to measure the pulse, analyze the material, and test its reactions to different stimuli. What they discovered was astonishing. The device emitted electromagnetic pulses at frequencies that were not just unusual, they were impossible by any known scientific standard. The patterns were complex, precise, and, in some cases, appeared to carry information. Dr. Cruz proposed that the device could be a kind of communication tool, or even a gateway. Perhaps it had allowed the crew of the Horizon Star to cross the fold, and now it was attempting to communicate with the researchers. The more they studied it, the more unsettling it became. The device seemed to respond to thought and emotion. When someone focused on calm observation, the blue light dimmed slightly. When someone approached with fear or impatience, it flared violently. The team began to realize that traditional scientific methods might not be enough to understand it. Logic and reason only went so far. Beyond a certain point, the device seemed to operate on a level that transcended human understanding. One afternoon, Dr. Cruz sat alone aboard the ship studying the device. She thought about the crew, about what they must have experienced in the fold, and about the final notebook entry. "We have crossed through the fold. Time doesn't move here. If we return, we bring something that shouldn't exist," she whispered to herself, trying to imagine what that meant. Then, without warning, the device pulsed brighter than ever before. The lights in the room flickered and the air seemed to hum. Dr. Cruz felt a strange sensation, as if she were being drawn toward it, pulled by some invisible force. She quickly backed away, heart pounding, but the experience left her shaken. Whatever the crew had encountered in the fold, it had not only survived, they had brought part of it back. And that part was now in her hands. The device was not just an artifact. It was a fragment of a place, a force, a reality that humans were not meant to fully comprehend. The team began running simulations to try to understand the fold itself. Using the crew's sketches, magnetic readings, and device data, they attempted to reconstruct the conditions the Horizon star had encountered decades ago. The results were perplexing. The simulations suggested a region of space where normal physics did not apply. Time behaved inconsistently, gravity fluctuated, and electromagnetic fields shifted unpredictably. It was as if reality itself bent and folded, creating a space where normal rules were meaningless. The implications were staggering. If the crew had truly crossed this fold, they had entered a dimension where time, space, and physical laws were different, and the device had come back with them. It was no longer simply an object, it was a bridge between worlds, a tangible connection to a place humans had never experienced. The realization frightened many members of the team. Some scientists began reporting strange experiences, visions of black oceans, endless skies, and lights moving in impossible patterns. A few even claimed to hear voices calling their names. The device seemed to affect not just technology, but the mind itself. Fear grew alongside fascination, and Dr. Cruz understood that they were in uncharted territory. One night, as the team studied the device, it pulsed in a sequence that had never been observed before. The lights dimmed and brightened rhythmically, almost like it was trying to communicate. Dr. Cruz focused on understanding the pattern. She realized it mirrored some of the symbols in the crew's sketches. Could the device be attempting to guide them, to show them a path or a key? She called the team together and presented her theory. "The device is not just a tool," she said. "It's a map, or maybe a guide. The crew of the Horizon star used it to cross the fold, and now it's trying to teach us the same thing. But we have to be careful. The fold is not a place we fully understand, and the device is more powerful than anything we've ever seen." The team debated whether to continue interacting with the device. Some feared that it was too dangerous, that even small mistakes could have catastrophic consequences. Others argued that humanity had a rare opportunity to learn something extraordinary. Dr. Cruz pushed for continued observation, careful experimentation, and extreme caution. As they studied the device further, the team discovered a hidden feature. Certain sequences of pulses seemed to stabilize the surrounding environment. Metal objects stopped vibrating, compasses returned to normal, and electronic equipment functioned again. It was as if the device could manipulate reality, creating temporary pockets of stability within its chaotic influence. The discovery led to new experiments. The team began attempting controlled interactions, observing how the device reacted to different inputs. Each trial was meticulous and measured. Some sequences caused the device to pulse gently, almost like breathing. Others caused violent reactions, sparks flying and alarms blaring. Each experiment revealed more about the device, but it also reinforced the idea that it was alive in some sense, aware of its environment and the people around it. The more they understood, the more questions remained. The fold, The device and the Horizon Star itself were all connected in ways that defied explanation. Dr. Cruz began to suspect that the crew had not just crossed into another space, they had brought back a fragment of it, and that fragment, the device, was still learning, evolving and reacting to the presence of humans. The facility became a place of wonder and tension. Scientists and military personnel worked together, but the atmosphere was tense. Some wanted to shut everything down, fearing the consequences. Others were driven by curiosity, unable to resist the pull of the unknown. The device was a puzzle, a danger, and a marvel all at once. Dr. Cruz often reflected on the crew who had disappeared decades ago. They had entered the fold, encountered something unimaginable and returned, or at least part of what they encountered had returned. The device was their legacy, a connection to a place that humans were not meant to fully understand. And now, it was humanity's turn to learn, to observe, and perhaps to unlock the secrets of the fold. But there was also a sense of urgency. The device's influence seemed to grow stronger with time. The longer it remained, the more unpredictable it became. Dr. Cruz worried that they might not be able to contain it indefinitely. Every day was a balance between discovery and danger, between curiosity and caution. And through it all, the Horizon Star remained silent. Its decks echoed with the footsteps of scientists. Its halls hummed with the soft pulse of the device, and the past lingered in every corner. The ship had returned after decades, bringing with it a force that defied comprehension. The world had glimpsed the impossible, and now it faced the challenge of understanding it. Dr. Cruz knew that the journey was just beginning. The device held answers, but it also held danger. The fold was real, and the crew had crossed it. And, while the ship and its artifact were here, humanity was only starting to uncover the truth. What the Horizon Star had returned with was not just a mystery, it was a test, a puzzle, and perhaps a warning. Every night, as the blue glow pulsed softly in the quiet halls, Dr. Cruz felt the weight of responsibility. The device was more than an object. It was alive, aware, and connected to something beyond human understanding. And as she watched the pulses, she knew that the true story of the Horizon Star, the fold, and the device was only beginning to unfold. By the time Part 5 begins, the Horizon Star had become both a source of fascination and fear. Dr. Elena Cruz and her team had spent months studying the mysterious device aboard the ship. It had revealed strange patterns, reacted to human emotions, and even stabilized small areas around it when manipulated carefully. But with every new discovery, the team began noticing subtle, unsettling changes, not just in their instruments, but in themselves. It started slowly. At first, a few scientists reported minor headaches, difficulty concentrating, or brief moments of dizziness. Dr. Cruz dismissed it at first, attributing it to stress, fatigue, or the cold, sterile environment of the secure facility. But soon, the experiences became harder to ignore. Researchers reported faint whispers when no one was nearby, shadows moving slightly out of sync, and a sense of being watched, even when alone. Some noticed that they were becoming forgetful, unable to recall recent conversations or tasks that had been perfectly routine the day before. One night, as Dr. Cruz reviewed the device's pulse patterns, the blue glow seemed brighter than usual. She felt an inexplicable chill sweep over her, as if the temperature in the room had dropped by several degrees. Her pen trembled in her hand, and she could swear she heard someone calling her name softly, almost under her breath. She paused, scanning the room, but no one was there. The faint sound faded, leaving only the hum of the device and her own rapid heartbeat. The next morning, she gathered the team for a meeting. Some members had begun experiencing vivid dreams or hallucinations. One scientist had described seeing the Horizon Star drifting silently through endless black waters, lit by strange, impossible auroras, and hearing voices calling their name. Another reported fleeting visions of the missing crew standing silently, on deck, their faces calm but their eyes strange and unfamiliar. Everyone agreed on one point. The device was influencing more than just instruments. It was affecting their minds. Attempts to shield the device with lead, Faraday cages, or distance proved only partially effective. Even in isolated rooms, the team could sense its presence. Dr. Cruz began to record detailed logs of each individual's experiences, noting times, emotional states, and proximity to the device. She realized that the influence of the device was not consistent. It seemed to amplify fear, curiosity, or obsession depending on the person. The more a person tried to resist it, the stronger the sensations became. Dr. Cruz herself was not immune. As the lead researcher, she spent hours alone observing the device, trying to understand it. One night, she felt the pulse of blue light, synchronized with her own heartbeat. The air seemed thick and alive. Then came the whispering again. Faint but unmistakable. It called her name, then paused as if waiting for a response. She shivered, feeling both fear and an unexplainable sense of duty. The device was not just reacting, it was communicating in a way that challenged her mind and senses. Over time, the team noticed more physical phenomena. Floor panels vibrated, lights flickered in patterns that mimicked the device's pulses, and metallic objects nearby resonated faintly. Some researchers reported temperature fluctuations in isolated corners, feeling sudden heat or cold. Even in rooms where equipment had been removed, subtle effects remained, as if the ship itself had absorbed part of the device's energy. Concern grew, and the military personnel overseeing the project began raising alarms. They wanted to shut down the research, to isolate the device completely, and to evacuate the personnel. But Dr. Cruz argued against it. She believed that understanding the device's influence was essential. If they abandoned the study now, they might lose the opportunity to learn what the crew of the Horizon Star had discovered decades ago. The situation reached a critical point when a small group of scientists attempted to manipulate the device's pulse sequences directly. Using carefully calibrated sensors, they tried to replicate patterns observed in the Horizon Star's logs. For a few minutes, the experiment seemed successful. Lights dimmed, vibrations subsided, and instruments stabilized. But then, the device reacted violently. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the soft blue glow intensified to an almost blinding brightness. Panic swept through the room. Scientists shouted, equipment toppled, and a sudden, unexplained gust of air swept across the facility. Afterward, the team discovered that one of the scientists had vanished. There was no sign of struggle, no exit route, no evidence of where they had gone. The only clue was the faint echo of a whisper calling their name, captured on nearby audio equipment. The event sent shockwaves through the facility. Fear was now tangible, gripping the team as tightly as their curiosity. They realized that the device was not only powerful, it was unpredictable, capable of affecting both reality and perception. Dr. Cruz organized emergency protocols, emphasizing caution and careful observation. She instructed the team to maintain detailed logs, record emotional states, and avoid unnecessary interactions with the device. They implemented shifts, limiting exposure, and introduced psychological support. Despite these measures, subtle disturbances persisted. Shadows moved slightly in peripheral vision, faint lights pulsed unexpectedly, and occasional whispers seemed to echo throughout the halls of the ship. The device's influence began to affect team dynamics. Some members grew obsessed, spending long hours aboard the Horizon Star, attempting to decode the pulses and patterns. Others grew fearful, avoiding the ship altogether and demanding strict limits. Arguments erupted over experimental approaches, safety protocols, and the ethical implications of interacting with something beyond comprehension. Even Dr. Cruz felt the tension within herself, part fascination, part fear, and part an unshakable sense of responsibility. As the days passed, Dr. Cruz noticed subtle changes in her own perception. Occasionally, she felt time stretch, with moments lasting longer than they should. Sounds seemed slightly delayed or amplified. The hum of the device sometimes merged with the natural sounds of the ship, creating a disorienting effect. She began recording these experiences meticulously, realizing that the device's influence was not random. It interacted with consciousness in ways no one yet understood. Then came another shocking discovery. Late one night, as Dr. Cruz reviewed logs and pulse sequences, she noticed that the device's patterns were beginning to form sequences that mirrored human thought. For instance, when someone thought about a specific object or memory, the pulses would subtly reflect that thought, almost like a response. It was as if the device could perceive, interpret, and react to human consciousness. The realization was both exciting and terrifying. They were no longer studying a mere artifact. They were interacting with something that could learn, adapt, and perhaps communicate. With the growing tension, hallucinations, and unexplained disappearances, Dr. Cruz began considering the possibility that the Horizon Star's crew had experienced similar phenomena decades ago. The fold, the logs, and the final notebook entries hinted that the crew had encountered something beyond the ordinary, something capable of influencing mind, time, and perception. The device, it seemed, was a fragment of that force, alive, aware, and potentially dangerous. The warnings became clearer when subtle messages appeared in the device's pulses. Dr. Cruz observed sequences that corresponded eerily with the words from the crew's final log. "We have crossed through the fold. Time doesn't move here. If we return, we bring something that shouldn't exist." The pulses seemed to echo these words rhythmically, as though repeating a warning or a message. It was impossible to know whether this was coincidence or deliberate communication, but the effect on the team was undeniable. Some researchers began to leave, unable to handle the strain. Others, however, grew more determined. They felt compelled to understand, to push the boundaries of human knowledge. Dr. Cruz struggled to maintain control, balancing the drive for discovery with the escalating risks. The facility became a place of both wonder and terror, a battleground between human curiosity and the mysterious force brought back by the Horizon Star. One night, Dr. Cruz had an experience that would remain with her forever. Alone in the observation room, she felt the device's pulse synchronize with her heartbeat. The room seemed to shimmer, as if the walls were bending slightly. A whisper echoed clearly in her mind. "We are here." It was not a sound exactly, but a perception, a communication that transcended ordinary senses. She realized with a mixture of awe and fear that the device had the ability to reach across perception, to communicate directly with consciousness. The implications were staggering. If the device could interact with the human mind, then every interaction carried risk. It was not merely a tool, it was a presence, a force that could influence thought, perception, and perhaps reality itself. The warnings from the Horizon Star's crew were no longer abstract. They were real. And Dr. Cruz understood that the team was now living through similar experiences, walking the fine line between discovery and danger. As the weeks continued, the team implemented stricter protocols. They limited direct exposure, used remote sensors whenever possible, and documented every incident meticulously. Even so, the effects of the device could not be fully contained. Faint whispers persisted, shadows moved in impossible ways, and hallucinations continued to plague those who spent extended time near it. The Horizon Star had returned. Months had passed since the Horizon Star returned, and the world outside had largely accepted its mysterious presence. But inside the secure naval facility, Dr. Elena Cruz and her team were living in a reality unlike anything they had imagined. The device aboard the ship had grown increasingly unpredictable, pulsating with rhythms that seemed almost conscious, interacting with human thought, emotion, and even the environment itself. Each day brought new discoveries, new fears, and new warnings. Despite the precautions, the team could not fully shield themselves from its influence. Shadows still moved oddly in the corner of their vision. Whispers, faint and almost imperceptible, reached them at random moments, repeating their names or cryptic phrases. Instruments continued to behave erratically, even when disconnected or shielded. Every interaction with the device carried a weight, a risk, a reminder that the ship was more than metal and machinery. It was a living puzzle. Dr. Cruz often reflected on the crew of the Horizon Star. They had disappeared decades ago, crossed the fold and returned, or at least a part of what they had encountered had returned with them. The crew's final notebook entries had warned of something that should not exist, and now it was clear that they had been right. The device was not merely a tool, it was a fragment of the fold itself, a bridge to a place where the normal rules of reality did not apply. The team worked tirelessly to decode the pulses of the device. They discovered that the patterns were increasingly complex, no longer random, and in some cases almost symmetrical, like a language. Dr. Cruz hypothesized that the device might be attempting to communicate or even teach them about the fold. But there was danger in attempting to understand too much, too quickly. Every time the device pulsed more strongly, someone nearby would experience disorientation, hallucinations, or sudden lapses in memory. One night, as Dr. Cruz observed the device alone, she experienced something that would change her understanding forever. The blue glow pulsed in sync with her heartbeat, but this time it began to shift colors, softly, almost imperceptibly at first, from blue to faint green. The lights in the room flickered, and the hum of the ship deepened into a low vibration that she could feel in her chest. Then came the whisper, not a sound this time, but a perception, a message that entered her mind directly. Do not force it. Do not break the path. Follow the pulse. Dr. Cruz froze, her mind racing. The device was communicating, not with words, not in sound, but directly with thought. She realized that the crew had likely experienced the same phenomenon decades ago. They had crossed into the fold with the device as their guide, and now the device was trying to guide her too. But guide her to what? And at what cost? Over the next few days, the team experimented cautiously, attempting to follow the device's patterns rather than control them. When they synchronized their observations with the pulse sequences, instruments stabilized slightly, and the whispers subsided. Dr. Cruz noted in her logs that the device seemed to reward careful, patient observation, but reacted violently to forceful manipulation or impatience. It was intelligent in its own way, a consciousness formed from the fold, or perhaps a fragment of the fold itself. But despite these precautions, strange incidents continued. One scientist vanished briefly during a controlled observation. There was no struggle, no explanation, only the faint echo of a name in the device's pulse pattern. When the scientist returned, they claimed to have experienced a sense of timelessness, as if days had passed in a matter of moments in a place that was both familiar and impossible. No one could verify the experience, yet the person was visibly altered, quieter, more cautious, and visibly shaken. Dr. Cruz realized that the device was testing them, exposing them to the fold in controlled increments. Every pulse, every fluctuation, was a subtle lesson in perception, in patience, and perhaps in respect. It became clear that humanity could not approach the fold with arrogance or force. It demanded careful observation, trust, and attentiveness. The Horizon Star had returned not merely as a ship, but as a teacher, a warning, and a guide. One evening, the team noticed an unprecedented phenomenon. The device's pulses synchronized perfectly with the ship's internal vibrations, creating a resonance that seemed to extend beyond the ship itself. The air around the vessel shimmered faintly, and shadows appeared to stretch and twist unnaturally. The team watched in awe and fear as the glow intensified, bathing the room in a soft, otherworldly light. The device was awakening, or perhaps reaching the next stage of its interaction with humanity. Dr. Cruz realized they had reached a critical point. The device's power was increasing, its influence spreading, and the team had to make a choice. They could continue studying it, risking exposure to forces they could not control, or they could attempt to isolate it completely, potentially losing the opportunity to understand the fold. The decision weighed heavily on her. Curiosity, fear, responsibility, every emotion intertwined in a knot of tension. In a moment of clarity, Dr. Cruz gathered the team and proposed a cautious plan. They would follow the device's patterns, recording every reaction, and allow it to guide them rather than forcing control. The idea was controversial, but the evidence suggested it was the only safe approach. Slowly, methodically, they began mapping the pulse sequences to actions aboard the ship, observing how the device interacted with human thought and emotion. Days turned into nights, and the team began to notice remarkable changes. When they followed the device's sequences precisely, hallucinations lessened, shadows stabilized, and the air seemed calmer. The device's blue glow became steady, almost comforting rather than erratic and threatening. Dr. Cruz realized they had found a fragile harmony, an understanding that required patience, respect, and attention to subtle signals. But the calm was temporary. One evening, without warning, the device pulsed violently, brighter than ever before. Alarms blared and the ship seemed to shudder. The team was thrown to the ground, and Dr. Cruz felt a sudden, disorienting rush, as if time itself had fractured. When she regained her bearings, she noticed the ship's windows glimmering with a strange light, as if the horizon star were surrounded by an invisible aura. Then, the whispers returned, louder and clearer than ever. Follow the path, or be lost. The message was direct, urgent, almost desperate. Dr. Cruz realized that the fold was no longer a distant phenomenon. They were experiencing it here, in real time. The device was opening a connection, a bridge between the fold and their reality. The team quickly synchronized their observations with the pulse patterns, attempting to stabilize the situation. Slowly, the violent fluctuations subsided, and the blue glow returned to a soft, steady pulse. But the incident left everyone shaken. The device was no longer just a tool or artifact. It was an active force, capable of altering perception, time, and perhaps even reality itself. In the following days, Dr. Cruz and her team continued careful observation. They documented every reaction, every pulse, every change in themselves and the environment. The device seemed to guide them, revealing fragments of the fold, offering glimpses into a reality that defied comprehension. But it also made it clear that they were outsiders, intruders in a space that had rules they could barely understand. Then came the final warning, subtle but undeniable. During a routine observation, the device pulsed in a pattern that mirrored the horizon star's original logs. The sequence repeated the crew's final words. We have crossed through the fold. Time doesn't move here. If we return, we bring something that shouldn't exist. The team realized that the crew had returned safely only because they respected the fold, but that any misstep could result in disappearance, or worse. Dr. Cruz recorded a final observation in her log. The device was not malevolent, but it demanded respect. It was a guardian, a guide, and a warning. The fold was real, dangerous, and beyond human comprehension. But the Horizon Star's device offered humanity a glimpse of it, a chance to learn and survive. As the weeks passed, the team continued careful study, documenting their experiences and maintaining the balance between curiosity and caution. The world outside remained unaware of the true scope of the mystery, but inside the facility, humanity had touched the edge of the unknown. The Horizon Star had returned not to reveal all its secrets, but to remind the world that some mysteries are greater than humans and that patience, observation, and respect are the keys to survival. Finally, Dr. Cruz stood on the deck of the Horizon Star, looking out at the quiet night sky. The device pulsed softly in the center of the ship, its light steady and almost peaceful. She understood now that the journey was not about control or mastery. It was about observation, understanding, and humility in the face of forces far greater than themselves. The Horizon Star remained in the secure facility, a silent witness to human curiosity and the unknown. Its crew might never be fully understood, and the fold might remain beyond comprehension, but the device offered a fragile bridge, a chance to learn without crossing the line. And as Dr. Cruz watched the blue glow pulse softly in the quiet of the night, she felt a deep sense of respect, awe, and a reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be conquered. They are meant to be observed. The story of the Horizon Star had reached its current conclusion, but it remained unfinished. The device pulsed gently. The ship stood